Film and Publication Board has published new guidelines for the classification of material suitable for certain age groups. It will it will come into effect in July. According to board numbers from 2017, 12% of the total complaints received were about blasphemy, for example. Complaints about sex and nudity comprise 68% of the total number of complaints. Well, to tell us more about these new guidelines, we are joined in our Pretoria studios by Lynette Kamineth, spokesperson for the Film and Publication Board. Morning, ma'am, and thank you very much for your time. I know from time to time you review guidelines on movies and video games. And then with the latest one, particularly you're guided by what kind of complaints that you are getting. We've been fascinated about blasphemy, for example.
Viewers as well. Actually, just firstly, thanks for this opportunity to correct the misperception that the Film and Publication Board has dropped blasphemy. It's actually not something that we would drop because it speaks directly to the rights of a specific group of people. And what we have done, in fact, is we have packaged blasphemy under the classifiable element of prejudice, where we feel it's more apt to actually have it packaged like that, because blasphemy, along with all sorts of other characteristics, group identifiable characteristics, actually fits neatly under prejudice. Blasphemy, for instance, speaks to a specific religious connotation, and that has to do with the upholding of human rights in South Africa. So we want to just correct that misperception. It's not been dropped, as has been said in some media reports, but it is repackaged under the element of prejudice. Okay, just for clarity, you will no longer be signposting it as a kind of with a B warning, but it will fall under the prejudice warning. Yes, so it will be signposted on your games and your films and your movies in theatres as P for prejudice. Okay, and what informed that decision? So, Dan, what we do at the Film and Publication Board is that we try always to balance certain rights and responsibilities in South Africa based on our constitution. And to be able to do that, we need to be in touch with what's going on in society. So every 5 years, we actually review those guidelines. We go through quite an extensive process of public consultation, consulting with the industry, to just assess, what is the benchmark for in society in terms of social values and norms and things. So what then happens is that these discussions we have with the public, along with research that we do, informs the classification guidelines. And these guidelines are actually a very important tool that is used by our classifiers when they look at the content of various materials to assess whether it is suitable for whatever age rating, as well as to give advisories to the public on what they can expect when they watch a particular movie or play a particular game. Okay. Is there a sense at the FPB that reclassifying blasphemy under prejudice will achieve the desired results in terms of viewing and addressing sensitivities in society? So that is a question that we went out and we actually asked the public in the latest round of consultations that we did in 2018. And there was a definite sense that blasphemy is still important in society, that it in fact needs to be elevated in some way. So by packaging it under the prejudice heading, what we've done is we've actually made it now a mandatory thing that our classifiers need to look at when they are looking at different materials. So yes, it's still important, and it has in fact been elevated by placing it under the P. Okay. We also hear that in terms of complaints, sex and nudity continue to be the majority of complaints, and that will continue to be signposted individually. What else has been reviewed whilst we have you on air that you could share with our viewers? Thanks, Dan. So we have looked holistically at the elements. We then asked the public specific questions because based on what we were finding, not only in terms of complaints, but also in terms of the elements that our classifiers are finding quite extensively in materials. We asked things like, should cultural sensitivity be something that is highlighted a lot more when we classify, specifically in a South African context where things like hate speech and that is something we need to guard against. We also, for instance, asked if the S and V elements are strong enough to capture things like gender-based violence, which also is quite prevalent in society and something that we needed to look at. Do we have an extra element for it, or is it sufficiently packaged under violence and sexual violence specifically?
Okay, just finally, just for clarity, the repackaging of blasphemy under prejudice makes it mandatory in terms of notification by anybody who's producing such material. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
It's now a mandatory element.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Lynette Kamineth, spokesperson for the Film and Publication Board.